I got this title from George Robertson. He, every now and then he used to say to me, "Nigel, are you happy?" And I'd go, I wasn't sure how to answer the question. Every now and then he'd ask it, and every now and then I'd struggle. Years later, in fact last year, I kind of worked out what that question meant to me. Anyway, are you happy?
Yes.
Could you be more happy? No? You're as happy as you can be. I was on a fundraising team one time. Do you know Brian Mona? And he had a kind of a strange expression on his face. And Mary White, who was the team leader, said, "What's the matter, Brian?" He goes, "I'm desperately trying to be happy." And sometimes that's kind of the case, isn't it? Okay. Exposition of Divine Principle, page 1. Everyone is struggling to attain happiness and avoid misfortune. From the commonplace affairs of individuals to the great events that shape the course of history, each is at root an expression of the human aspiration for ever greater happiness. Can you have too much happiness? Should we be satisfied with just a bit of happiness? Shouldn't you just be happy with what you've got? It's confusing, isn't it? We should be aspiring for ever greater happiness, and yet we also should be grateful for what we've got. On the whole, I've not been a happy person. Kind of miserable, really, on the whole. I asked Chizuko what makes her happy, and she said, "Making other people happy makes me happy." Chizuko's basically a happy person. What makes me happy is hearing Chizuko laugh. I wrote a poem last year about Chizuko's laugh, and one of the lines says, "You would rather I laugh than write poetry." You know, Chizuko would rather I was a more cheerful person than the serious type that sits there writing poetry. Psalm 30, verse 5. For his anger is but for a moment, his favour is for life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. The religious message, or part of the religious message, is suffer now and be happy later. This passage is trying to make sense of the suffering that you go through. His anger, of course, he's talking about God's anger. And, you know, God's angry with you and he's giving you a hard time. You know, the reason you're suffering is you've done wrong and God's giving you a hard time. But don't worry, it's just for now. It's just for a moment. His, what's it say? His favour is for life. You know, just for suffering is just for now. So, can we expect to be happy now as religious people? Can we expect to be happy now? This morning we were reading Handake, Chizuko and I, and we're reading Father's autobiography. And Father was talking about his wedding day, 1960, to True Mother. And he said to True Mother, "You can't expect to be happy like an ordinary couple." And she said, "Don't worry about me." I can't remember the exact words, but basically, "Don't worry about me." And when I read that, and I've read it before, but I just started crying, and I couldn't finish reading. I had to get Chizuko to finish reading. That, you know, True Mother, true parents willingly gave up their happiness so that we could be happy. Family pledge number 4. Our family, the owner of Chonolguk, pledges to build the universal family encompassing heaven and earth, which is the Heavenly Parent's ideal of creation, and perfect the world of freedom, peace, unity, and happiness by centering on true love. So every day we make this pledge. We pledge to build a world of happiness. We promise to God we will build a world of happiness. And through God's ideal, God's ideal is a universal family of heaven and earth. And that's what, God gets if God's ideal is established, God will be happy. And will perfect the world of freedom, peace, unity, and happiness. We're not pledging, I pledge to work on my own happiness. That's not what the pledge is. The pledge is we will work for, this universal happiness. How can you be happy anyway? The world's in a mess. You still have got fallen nature. God is suffering. A few years ago, I saw this thing that went round, this video clip that went round the internet, around Facebook, from Dylan Moran. I'd never heard of him before, an Irish comedian. And he said, "Don't sleep. Nobody can sleep. How can you sleep anyway? Look at the news. What sort of person are you that you can sleep? If you can go to sleep, you are clearly a criminal and somehow complicit in all that has gone wrong. So how can you sleep? How on earth can you be happy at all with the world in the state it's in?" Paul, you said you were happy and you couldn't be any happier. Don't you care about what's going on? But we are meant to be happy. Absolutely, we are meant to be happy. Here are two happy people. Do you recognize them? How can you tell they're happy? They're smiling. They've got big smiles on their faces. And we know that people went through wars so that other people could have the chance to be happy. People do sacrifice so that other people can be happy. So, it's almost our duty to be happy because of what has gone before, the sacrifices that others have made. They willingly made so that other people could be happy. So even just on a level of duty, we have a duty to be happy or to find happiness. Here is someone not happy. How can you tell? You can't be happy all the time, of course. We know you can't be happy all the time. Children they show their emotions immediately. They're either, they're happy this moment, and then 2 minutes later, this same child could be completely happy and joyful and laughing. Just 2 minutes later. They're sort of in the moment. Children live in the moment. They don't have such a memory of, even 5 minutes ago. Is he unhappy or just thinking? I think unhappy, but it could be either. He could be planning his next chess move, couldn't he? But actually his eyes are over to the left. He's looking over to one side. So he is thinking, but he's not, he's wondering what to do next, perhaps in his life. We are more complicated. Adults are more complicated than children in a way. So you ask an adult, "Are you happy?" And apart from Paul, they'll say something like, "Most of the time," or "I'm going through a rough patch at the moment," or "Oh, it's great being with my grandchildren. I can't complain. I've got a good job. I've got a roof over my head. Lots of things have gone wrong recently, but I feel God is working in my life." So I've said all of those things. So adults are more, if I can say the word properly, contemplative. We contemplate, we think about our life, and we compare the ups and downs. We think about how things are. We may not tally them up accurately, but we do think about things. And so in a way, there's kind of two types of happiness, isn't there? There's in-the-moment happiness, where we experience some emotion, some joy, some pleasure at the moment, and that makes us happy. Or we're contemplative. So it's an appraisal of our life, of how things are overall. And these two affect each other. if you never had an in-the-moment nice experience that made you happy, if you never experienced that, how would your contemplation be over your life in general? You know, you would think, oh, I've had a pretty terrible life, you know, no good moments whatsoever. Or you could, if you have a generally good outlook on life, you're bright and cheerful generally, your in-the-moment happiness could be even greater. Or you won't look so, you won't feel that the bad experiences are quite as bad as you might. You can have one very terrible experience in the moment, and that will affect the rest of your life. You know, if you were physically attacked, that could affect the rest of your life, and you feel, and you might not feel you could never be happy again, or something like that. So they do affect each other, these two, in the moment and generally speaking. Are you the kind of person when something wrong happens, you say, typical, just my luck? So the etymology of happy. Etymology, you know what that means? It's kind of how the word is, what the word used to mean and what it means now and how it's changed over time. So interestingly, the etymology of happy, from Greek to Irish, all over Europe, the word happy first meant lucky. And good fortune or something like that. We still have the word hapless in English. Hapless means unlucky, so without hap. Except for Welsh, which the original word used to mean wise. Isn't that interesting? And shiawase in Japanese. We were chatting with Chizuko yesterday and this morning about it. That can also mean, it means happy, but also it can mean good fortune or blessing. You know the song? I was wondering whether we do the song, Shiawase te Nandaro. Right, what was I going to say? So it's, we still think, you know, when we're lucky, you know, you win, you win just a little silly prize, and you're really happy. You won something, you know, a scratch card or the lottery or the raffle at the Women's Federation Christmas party. We won a key holder, didn't we, or something? And we were really, really chuffed with that. When something nice happens, we still think that. It's always worth going back to Greece when you're thinking philosophically. This is pronounced, I had to look this one up, eudaimonia. So this also translates as happiness or welfare or human flourishing or prosperity. But what does human flourishing mean? The common belief amongst Greeks was a life of physical pleasure and material comfort. That was the general view of happiness. For the sophists, it was military and political success and status. So if you were successful and you had political power, you know, that was happiness. Or for Plato, rational virtue and contemplation. So we need to understand, in order to understand what flourishing means, we need to understand what is a human. What does it mean to be human? We have to know what it means to be human. So for Plato, he was saying, yes, you do need a specific setting, you need an environment, but also you need to it needs to be moral. It needs to be based in morality. So, you know, if you have, you know, pleasure and comfort are important, but you can get used to them. Power is important on some level, but it can be lost and it can be corrupting. And Plato realized that happiness had to be a virtuous happiness. It had to be a moral happiness. You cannot be happy, you cannot be truly happy if you get your happiness in an immoral way. So we had to develop an environment and we had to develop ourselves. The Stoics said you just got to accept. Just have to accept and find tranquility, which is very similar to most religious messages. Most religions will say to you, just be happy with what you've got and find tranquility there. So we need to find a definition of what it means to be human in order to know what it means to be happy, to be truly happy. All religions will have something to say about what it means to be human. But it's also dangerous thinking. You know, the Nazis or the communism have a definition of what it means to be human, which was wrong, and it leads to, greater suffering. Divine Principle has a clear definition of what it means to be human, and therefore what it means to be happy. We'll come back to that in a bit. So there is a science of happiness. Scientists study happiness and how to be happy. In brain science, you've got all these chemicals going through your brain. Serotonin affects self-esteem and handling rejection, and you get rewards. Rewards feeling, when you get serotonin, you get the feeling of importance and of being valued by other people. Dopamine affects focus, memory, and sleep, and it's the reward you get when you achieve a goal. And so these chemicals are so important that some people think that's all there is. We are just chemicals flooding through our brain. And that's what happiness is. Psychologists talk about being happy when you practice gratitude. Have you heard of that before? Someone else? Valuing others, spending time in nature, have goals. There's a whole branch of psychology talking about this. And of course, our true parents always mention these ones. Physical well-being, exercise, sleep, nutrition, sunlight. You need those things to be happy. Within the science of happiness, they also know that they even know the best temperature and the best location for happiness. A nice warm evening by the sea. That's the best place for happiness, they say. You can do all of these things. You can follow all of those, and you will benefit from it. But I promise you, there will still be something will go wrong. Something will invade your happiness. Religion often tells us to go against these things. Don't sleep too much. Don't eat too much. Fasting, all of those sort of things. Why? And go without sleep, fast, and then still be happy and still be grateful. Why is that? I think these are my ideas now. I think there's a happiness spectrum, and ranging from just physical pleasure will make you happy. There's sort of lots of different types of in-the-moment happiness. There's a contemplative happiness. There's happiness from feeling loved, and there's happiness from artistic giving. They all interact with each other. They're all important. They all colour and shade each other. But they're all kind of deeper, more meaningful, more parental, perhaps. Physical pleasure, being hugged. Children need to be held. Children need to be hugged. But we need to be hugged as well. We need to be held. Perhaps not as often as children need it, but we still need it. We still need those things. We still need all of those different types of happiness. And, to really be, for God to be happy, we need to be happy. God wants us to be happy. And we're not just talking about one person here. We're talking about the universal family encompassing heaven and earth. So this happiness spectrum should absolutely be rooted into God. Just as Plato was saying that, and all the major religions saying that happiness has to be virtuous, has to be moral, and ultimately it has to be rooted in God. Physical pleasure not rooted in morality, not rooted in God, will feel empty, dirty, and it will ultimately destroy you. This is why temptation comes through physical pleasure, or often comes through that. So it's training, it's indemnity condition. We deny these things in order to learn the deeper meanings of happiness, finding happiness. Through divine principle, we know what a human being should be. A human being is someone that gets their happiness through living for the sake of others. But what happens if you don't feel happy through living for the sake of others? Or you find it difficult to always feel happy? So we force ourselves to do the things that we think we should do. We do fasting, we do praying, we invest, hoping that we'll grow, we'll change. And then sometimes you touch the heart of God. And often, through a song like this, through the singing, tears come to my eyes. I'm sure you all have the same thing. And even, we feel and touch the heart of God. And I always, instantly, I get this kind of, oh, great, I touched the heart of God. I felt God. And I'm happy. I've got tears and I'm happy at the same time. And I remember Father saying one time, people used to call us a crazy church because people would be in floods of tears in church, in the sermon, in the service, and then they'd go out and they'd be laughing and cheerful and joyful. So that, in the Divine Principle quote, it talked about the commonplace affairs of individuals to the great events that shape the course of history. Each is at the root of an expression, human aspiration for ever greater happiness. So we can't get ever greater happiness unless it's rooted in God, unless it's rooted in growth and in developing this human family. In isolation, we can't do it. Even as a small group in South London, we can't do it. It has to be, to really find happiness, it has to be the world, the human, the whole family, the whole human family. That ever greater happiness, eventually, Father uses the expression, an explosion of love. When Adam and Eve love each other, God rejoices. This is because he participates in their love. God divided himself into Adam and Eve, man and woman, as partners of love. When the two come together in love, they collide and explode. And when God feels that exciting explosion, he is thrown on his back, intoxicated in love. When I say such a thing, it is not blasphemy. There is no blasphemy when it comes to love. All it takes is love, which God relishes so much. So this is the definition of being human, to achieve that. And we're excited by that, and we feel inspired, but sometimes it's difficult. And I'll come back to what I think George meant when he used to ask me, are you happy? Just last year, we went down to the One John at the farm. And I like to walk around and talk to my old friends there. And I went to talk to George. And I remembered his question to me, are you happy? And I thought about what he meant by that. And first and foremost, I think what he meant was I should think about my life. To be content, but not satisfied. There's a difference between contentment and satisfied. Content is, I'm happy, I'm happy, but I'm not satisfied. There is more to be had. So when you're satisfied, then you stop. To strive with what I have. I don't have everything, in a sense. I don't have everything that I need. I don't have, there's failings and weaknesses that I have. and I struggle. But to strive with what I've got, to be, I'm content with what I've got, to strive with what I got for something greater, to be the best that I could be. So that's what I realized, and the best that I can be is not just for me individual, but on all levels, family level, and individual, family, and society. So thank you very much.